G'day mate, 40 here. It's so easy to think about the negative, but this is a show about uplifting. This is a show about celebration and love and the presumption of grace and all these good things. And let's just take a minute to thank God what an amazing country we live in, where a modestly talented woman like Rebecca Lobach can grow up, have absolutely no interest in joining the military, and then just joins the military. She can operate as a Biden aide. She can be advanced to captain without any particular talent or diligence, and she can fly Black Hawk helicopters in the most dangerous parts of the United States at night, around Reagan Airport. I mean, 1 minute she's LGBTQ activist, then she can send her Black Hawk helicopter into a civilian airline and receive nothing but praise in the mainstream media about what a wonderful, fantastic woman she is. I mean, you can really achieve your dreams in America. And look, her flying wasn't the best, but her family was so good at removing all her social media. All right, all her social media just gone, or really did a great job scrubbing her online presence. All right, they took a few days to grieve and scrub her social media. And right, a normal captain, all right, would require thousands of hours of flight time, but Rebecca, she only needed like a couple of hours a week because she was busy working with President Joe Biden. She was his pet, his protege. She was busy being an LGBTQ activist. She was younger than the other two men on board, and she got promoted way above her level of competence because she worked for Joe Biden and she was a lesbian. And here we go, right? From the White House to the Potomac River in just a couple of weeks. So I suspect that the vastly more qualified men who were on the chopper with her, they were probably reluctant to issue her any corrections because you can't discipline women in the U.S. military the same way that you discipline men. Just a couple of weeks. So, right, how do you discipline a man? You can grab him, you can call him all sorts of names, right? You can't do that with women. So many of the ways that you have to discipline men, you cannot do with women. And so the women don't get the discipline. They're not held accountable to the same standards. Isn't it amazing? They can just rise up to the rank of captain. They can become generals, right? And be totally incompetent. Like, what an amazing country that we live in. We spend more of the U.S. military than any other place on earth. And we can afford to stock it with incompetence. And we can allow lesbian mafias to take over this niche and that niche. I mean, what an amazing country we live in. What an amazing country. It's all possible in America. You think, oh, I have to have competence if I'm going to succeed. And I say to you, no. Look at Rebecca Lobach. And talking to a friend, he says, it's clear the news media is being deliberately deceptive about her flying experience. Now the news reports are corrected to say she had a total of 450 hours of flight time. And she received the rank of captain with 450 hours of flight time. And the people who were supposed to be training her on that helicopter flight, obviously you can't discipline, you can't train women the same way that you can men. So they're older, they're vastly more qualified, but they are at a lower rank than she is. So how much of a sense of ease do you think they're going to have, correcting and training someone who outranks them on the virtue of being a DEI hire and activist? So looking at X, I don't have a problem with female pilots. I do. I don't want female pilots in the U.S. military because it destroys group cohesion, even if they're just as good and then not. Right? I don't want there because you can't discipline them the same way you can discipline men. It completely changes morale. You can't speak to them the same way that you do men. It's incredibly disruptive, dislocating, and men are going to drop out because men don't like competing with women. And so all these mediocre women get advanced because, what type of woman, let's be real here. I mean, I think it's fantastic. What type of woman joins the U.S. military and wants to fly a helicopter pilot. All right, it's lesbians, and I mean, she took some great selfies. What she did was bad, flying into that civilian airline, but she took great selfies, and somehow many people have this ugly stereotype that lesbians keep their hair short and cropped, but no, look at that wonderful long hair, and just look at that joy and that love. Like lesbian love, it's a beautiful thing. And when I say lesbian mafia, I don't mean mafia in the bad sense. I mean mafia in the good sense, that they help each other, that they create a caring community, right? A community of radical love and acceptance, where they lift each other up, right? It's so beautiful that wherever they go and they form community, and one person gets in power, and she promotes other members of her community. And they're not tied down by all these white supremacist, male attitudes towards competence. I am Leah says, so just to sum up the Rebecca Lobach news, Democrats are allowed to dig up 40-year allegations on people like Kavanaugh and Trump, but I'm not allowed to ask details about the first military helicopter pilot in history to fly into a civilian airplane and kill a bunch of kids. If Rebecca Lobach was in her position as a captain and a Black Hawk pilot because of DEI initiatives and politics, the blood of 67 souls is on the hands of the Biden administration. Look, you can't advance DEI without slaughtering a lot of people. And killing innocent people is bad, but the supernal transcendent beauty of diversity, equity, and inclusion, surely that's more important. There is a straight line from Nancy Mace. She was the first woman in an all-male military academy. So she destroyed male cohesion, a male sense of honor. She destroyed the ability to appropriately discipline cadets, right? She destroyed one military institution, and now we've got Rebecca Lobach. Wonderful, isn't it, how to have women in the military? Destroys cohesion, destroys trust, destroys a sense of honor, removes the ability to discipline, it lowers standards. But think about how rich and powerful we must be that we can afford to indulge in all this DEI excess. We are truly blessed. Okay, what do we have here?
Welcome to The Rabbit Hole. Have you ever heard of feminism to the third power? This was posted December 19th, 2017. Are you a man? Do you notice anyone in this picture? This is Army Captain Rebecca Lobach. Now, I know the media was very hesitant to release her name. They said it was due to her family's request. But check this out. Army withholds name of black helicopter crew in DC crash. 2 others identified. They had no problem identifying these 2 quick. It says here the 3rd crew member on the helicopter was a female pilot with 500 hours of flying experience. Okay, so this is where it gets really fishy for me, because it kept saying that the other 2 were pilots. Hold on a second. Who is pilot Ryan O'Hara, crew chief on Black Hawk? Former instructor of crew chief killed on Black Hawk in DC crash speaks. The only problem is, Ryan O'Hara was never a pilot. O'Hara listed in the Army immediately after high school, starting as a mechanic before becoming a crew chief due to eye stigmatism. He was unable to pursue a career as a pilot. Why were they saying he was a pilot? This is Ryan O'Hara.
Look, just because he's got eye stigmatism, like, since when do you have to be able to see accurately to become a pilot? Right, this is such white supremacist thinking. Like, I think it's amazing what a fantastic country we live in. All right, the people who can't see can operate as pilots. The people who have all sorts of emotional and physical disorders can be running our air traffic control and operating in the military and forming their own cliques and mafia in a good sense, right? Not the bad mafia, right? So the developmentally disabled mafia, where retarded people get together and they help each other out. Like, it's so 19th century to think that, oh, a pilot, he should be able to see. Like, we live in the postmodern world now. We got, like, machines and AI. We don't need pilots to do their seeing, right? We just turn it over to DEI and AI, and it's going to be great. It's going to be great.
O'Hara's information under the FFA. Notice how there's no medical information. He has to have a certificate. It's required to be a pilot. He was a mechanic. Now the other gentleman, Andrew Austin Reeves, he was a pilot. If you look here, he has his medical there. He has his certificate. He has all of his credentials here. So I went and looked up Rebecca Lobach. I found this interesting. She has no medical information available. Isn't that interesting? Donald Trump said it was a DEI hire. We don't have information, that's for sure, but things are getting crazy. The FAA turned away 1,000 job applicants because of its DEI rules, despite staff shortages, lawsuit claims. Here it says the military aircraft was flying above 300 feet, which it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be at 200 feet to avoid commercial jets arriving at the Virginia airport, and it was at least a half a mile off course when it collided with an American Airlines flight. They said the family didn't want her name out there.
Look, thinking that there's some big difference between 200 feet and 300 feet, again, that's white supremacist thinking. We need to move past this kind of white supremacist thinking, guys.
But yet her name is out there now, and all of her social media has been scrubbed, even members of her family. So I started digging. She was a White House aide with Biden. That's her in the middle. I found this interesting as well.
Well, of course you got to scrub her social media. It'll just totally wreck the narrative, guys. Right? We live in an age of narrative. Haven't you ever heard about the importance of narrative? I thought you blokes were more sophisticated than this. All right? Life is all about crafting a narrative now and getting followers and then releasing your own meme coins. And so how are we going to have a glorious DEI narrative? Right? How are we going to have the narratives that the media gives us? And how are they going to have any power if you allow these pesky facts, like this white supremacist thinking, get in the way of a bloody good narrative? Right? This is the age of narrative. We're here to create our own narratives, release our own meme coins. We're here to celebrate lesbian love. Like, you can't get too gay as far as I'm concerned. Let's turn the United States military into one big gay disco. It's going to be great. Didn't you hear General Wilmer yesterday? Oh, man, Kip, you're such a downer. Having women in a unit is like a grenade being thrown into a once cohesive unit. Standards of morale. Look, that's all factually true, but you're thinking like a white supremacist. Things get weird when you factor in the bedroom proclivities. Look, you have to get into your buffered identity. Like, don't be thinking about dicks and pussies, right? You know, testosterone and banging and squirting and oral love and don't stop thinking about dicks and pussies, man. You gotta get in that buffered identity. Just like you've got a brain, you use it to decide right and wrong. You use your strategic autonomy. You plot the path forward. You don't need no community. You don't need no tradition. You don't need no standards. You don't need that white supremacist thinking, right? This is the age of narrative, and it's going to be fantastic, man. I am so excited.
How many times can you hit the paper? March 29th, 2011, she was homeschooled, and she made the news. She was also there to walk Ralph Lauren when he received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Joe Biden. Interesting. She's only 28 years old, and she was a captain already. She was doing pretty good for herself. She owned a $567,000 home. But the crazy part about it, she didn't live there. The occupants were Virginia Field and Robert C. Vincent. But the other crazy part is Robert Vincent passed away on October 3rd, 2017. And if you ask Grok, all the info that Grok has on her was published after the crash. That's really interesting. Here are the publication dates. So what do we have here? When I checked out this photo, this says it's 71% AI generated. 29% chance that this picture is real. So I find it interesting that you can go back 50 years with Donald Trump and accusations against him, and Kavanaugh accusations against him, but we're not allowed to know anything about this woman. Everything was scrubbed. That should raise questions. And the fact that it wasn't put out there right off the bat, but yet they put the two other men out there. Now, I've never been a pilot, but it struck me as odd, and it seemed like 500 hours of flying experience was not that much, especially for someone who was named captain. She was the one flying the Black Hawk. That's what Grok said. She was the pilot in command. Check out what this pilot said about her 500 hours of flight time.
Now let's talk about the 500 hours briefly. 500 hours of flight time is so low, I wouldn't turn anybody loose in any of my airplanes at 500 hours with passengers for hire or flying anywhere near a major airport or anywhere else for that matter. I think, quite frankly, 500 hours is just barely adequate to get yourself up and back down safely. I really do. And the reason why...
Look, she wanted to do this flight. She was in the Biden administration, right? She was a captain. She's got a fantastic narrative. Like, you're going to say no to your captain? Like, yeah, and you might feel a bit insecure because you're supposed to be a pilot and you've got astigmatism, so understandably they were a bit abashed. But you can't say no to a woman. That would be sexist. She wanted to fly around a bunch of planes. And you're going to say no to a woman? Right? You can't do that. Always believe women. Come on, guys.
Well, I know that is because I was a 500-hour pilot at one time. And the time between when I got my pilot license and when I had my first major scare happens in that window, right? So somewhere between getting a pilot license and between 500 and 1,000 hours, something really sketchy is probably going to happen.
More white supremacist logic. Okay, she didn't have 500 hours, guys. She had 450. Pilot after pilot sounding the alarm that her piloting that Black Hawk in high traffic is insane, unprecedented, suicide, DEI.
Briefly, 500 hours of flight time is...
We've already got this white supremacist. Right, here is Rebecca Lobach with her special friend Sabrina Bell and Captain Samantha De Capu, who holds degrees with concentrations, sexuality, and violence. Yeah, Rebecca Lobach. I mean, what a good-looking woman. I mean, look at those biceps. I mean, she's a strong, tough, proud lesbian woman, and Rebecca Lobach also had a specialty in fighting sexual violence. She was out there, man. She was doing the Lord's work. Okay, some nice photos there. What a lovely woman. Here she is again. Just fantastic. Our new country's going to be great. Rebecca Lobach, who crashed a $30 million Black Hawk. I hear you can get a Black Hawk for $5 million. Trump was right. Back in 2011, who was responsible for the internet? Must have been a DEI hire. They missed this. She was still in ROTC training in 2018. How is she flying government continuity missions in a Black Hawk in Washington, D.C. 6 years later as a captain? Because she's in the right group. All right, she's in the lesbian mafia. Not the bad mafia. They don't whack people. They play softball. Right? They work out. I mean, they fly Black Hawks and they take selfies. Right? It's the good lesbian mafia. I mean, this is the type of person who's going to be fighting for us in all our wars going forward. Because as women move in, right, men move out. Yeah, she took her role very seriously. Look, just because she apparently took some selfies in a helicopter doesn't mean that she didn't take her work seriously, guys. There she is. I mean, she was just totally destroying the Army physical fitness test. I mean, there is a fit woman. Yeah, just 450 hours. Right? Right? How many other people in the U.S. Army with only 450 flight hours have killed 70 people? 70 confirmed kills. Right? Oh, man. This is her mother, CEO of a company that provides equine therapy for women. Well, I mean, you white supremacists are all about your drugs and your medication and your pharmaceuticals and your white supremacist Western medication. But have you ever considered the power of equine therapy? Incredibly important for people who still feel traumatized after killing their unborn. I don't know about you, but I find going on a good horse ride, it really helps me let go of any guilt I might feel about killing the unborn. And so much skepticism. So much skepticism. Yeah, she was serving in the Biden White House. She was a social aide. She was escorting Ralph Lauren, give him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and then she wants to fly a Black Hawk into a jetliner over the Potomac River. Who is you to tell her that she can't be all that she can be? She went active in 2019. So yeah, she just completely flew through ordinary standards because you can't hold women to ordinary standards because they'd fail. And then if you start failing women, then it's a civil rights violation. So how many captains have 450 hours of flight training? Why was she allowed to fly in a very busy air traffic control zone? Because she's a woman and she wanted to, bro. You're going to say no? And this is the last photo of the Black Hawk helicopter. Just fantastic, bright, gay colors. And look, she wasn't real up on her flight skills because she'd been real busy, like serving Joe Biden and his administration. Right? Where's she going to have time to do that flight training? So much skepticism, so much cynicism, so much hate out there when, like, let's celebrate this new world that we have. Like, let's celebrate the fantastic job that the Los Angeles Fire Department did, right? Los Angeles Fire Department is incredibly diverse. It's all run by lesbians named Kristen, right? We got much of our U.S. military run by lesbians, and I think that's great. Now we got wonderful Kristen Crowley, Harvard Business School. Her mission, creating systemic equity and inclusion across the LAFD. I hope that's Pete Hegseth's main mission for the Pentagon. Then there's the lovely Christina Hettner, first lesbian assistant chief, Harvard Kennedy School for Managing Diverse Organizations. Yeah, accused of a little domestic violence involving her girlfriend, but we've all been there. Wonderful Christine Larson, LAFD's first lesbian equity bureau chief. She filed complaints and filed complaints and filed complaints until they bought her off. The co-founder of Equity on Fire. She says that if you're a guy and you've passed out or you've fallen down in a building, and so, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get you out, but you probably did something wrong to get yourself in that position. And what about Jamie Brown, first LAFD lesbian training commander? Right? The old Los Angeles Fire Department, not diverse. The old U.S. military, not diverse. Both institutions run by white men. Yeah, they won wars and stuff, but now we've got things run by lesbians. Man, so inspiring. Our new country is going to be great. Remember the good old days when the University of California university system was run by a lesbian mafia? Think about how excellent the education was back then. We had an old lesbian network with Janet Reno presiding over everything and then bringing in various lesbians or lesbians just naturally rising to the top purely through merit. It's great. We've got lesbian mafia in the U.S. military promoting people like Ms. Lobach, and we have lesbian mafia running the fantastic Los Angeles Fire Department, and then we have the lesbians running the University of California system. Right, we had this lovely lady, lesbian head of UC Santa Cruz. And, yeah, she got criticized for expensive university-funded renovations on a campus home, for getting jobs for a girlfriend. But she's a well-regarded engineer. She owned lots of properties. Sad that she died by suicide. UC Santa Cruz Chancellor Denise Denton, despondent over work and personal issues, died Saturday after jumping from the roof of a 42nd San Francisco apartment building where her romantic partner lived. So the New York Times reported something striking. Report was dedicated to another panelist, Denise Denton. Did you know that bias is hurting women in science? Panel reports, well, bias is not only hurting women in science, it's hurting women in helicopters, guys. Dedicating a supposedly scientific report to anybody seems a little odd, but then there is much that is odd, yet instructively representative about the life and the extraordinary death of Denise Denton. Right, let's pause here and just let's celebrate the the extraordinary life and extraordinary death of this amazing engineer, Denise Denton. What a great educator she was. I mean, she's helped us become so much better as a society. Our new world is just going to be great. Extraordinary life, extraordinary death. So Denton won national praise for standing up after Larry Summers gave his talk at Harvard, and in her own words, daring to speak truth to power. Turns out that Denton wasn't exactly powerless herself. She was UC Santa Cruz's chancellor designate at $270,000 per annum. She'd been hired away from the University of Washington, whereas dean of engineering, she strongly favored ethnic minorities, gays and lesbians, immigrants, international students, and faculty, everybody except the single largest group of engineering students under her control, straight white males. Toward their welfare, she exhibited a tender regard reminiscent of that of Trotsky and Stalin for Ukrainian peasants. So Ms. Denton turned her UC Santa Cruz investiture ceremony into a 2-day marathon on the theme of achieving excellence through diversity, which featured inspiration and perspectives from Angela Davis, professor, history of consciousness, communist terrorist, assistant in murder. Denton's inaugural death sounded like a self-parody. What is diversity? I believe that diversity encompasses ethnicity, race, gender identification, sexual orientation, culture, religion, academic discipline, class, ability, disability, nation of origin, diversity of perspective, age, socioeconomic status, and any other difference that characterizes humanity. Now, being a fiery leftist did not stop Denton from cashing in. All right, she played the game. She got a $192,000 post for her lesbian lover. She had the university spend lavishly on the home provided for her. All right, $600,000 upgrade. The dog run for 2 border collies cost $30,000. The previous person who headed UC Santa Cruz was MRC Greenwood, another wonderful woman. Praised the college's 2 for the price of 3 deal. University of California, Santa Cruz should be commended for attracting and hiring 2 very qualified female engineers. And you'd be shocked to find out that MRC Greenwood is also a lesbian. She was out when she was a dean at UC Davis. And she moved up into the number 2 position in the entire University of California system. She was a provost at $380,000 per year. The only person on top of her was Janet Reno, another lesbian. And she quietly brought with her from Santa Cruz a female scientist named Linda Goff. And they owned property together secretly. And she created a wonderful post for her, executive faculty associate to the provost, with a salary of $192,000. So you've got all these lesbian female UC honchos getting $192,000 for their close personal lesbian friends. Now, Ms. Greenwood was forced to resign over the ethical improprieties of the post for Goff, and the job that she procured at UC Merced for her son from a failed heterosexual marriage. So, regarding these complaints, it adds fuel to the fire of complaints by faculty and students of a highly paid elite, a lesbian elite at UC, to the Whisper campaign about a powerful coterie of lesbians gaining power and influence within the UC system. Well, they've got power and influence within the Los Angeles Fire Department, and look how fantastic that went. We've got a lesbian clique in the U.S. military that doesn't allow lack of competence to, hold people back. Now, for mentioning the lesbian word, this journalist was forced to issue a retraction, but that was not good enough for the Diversicrats. So his paper had to run opinion pieces written by community members to address diversity issues, as well as a full reflections on the investiture of Ms. Denton page. And they agreed to continue diversity training, even though one Sentinel publisher in attendance whined that we've already sat through diversity training. Once in office, Denton was repeatedly harassed by student protesters even farther to the left. The radical activist community saw 2 things about Denton: her skin color and her title. So despite her endless harping on diversity and her lesbianism, to the demonstrators, she was just another evil white person. So depressed by all her woes, she jumped off her lover's luxury 42-second apartment building. So this is the type of person that the Court of Diversity provides for us. So what am I going to share with you next? I mean, so many great things to share. Let's not be imperialist, guys. Right? Imperialism's like white supremacism.
That is not the country that I live in. And that is not the country that I want to be part of. Exactly. I do not, expansion of influence, Commonwealth countries still, and they'd still probably be subjects of the king and the royal family. Right. That would be what I would guess. But again, I think that would take years to negotiate. And we're all speculating right now at this like incredibly complicated time. And none of this has really ever happened before. And it is moving quickly, which I don't think is necessarily terrible. But I will say that it just makes everything so politically charged. And so right now, I just got back, I should say, I was in Copenhagen until yesterday. I flew home yesterday. And they are, the Danes in this right now are at DEFCON 1 because they are having a very, very difficult time trying to figure out how to navigate this new world order. And remember, look, I know there's been a lot said here about the Europeans and, they haven't been great partners here. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, Denmark lost more people per capita in Afghanistan than we did, than any other country in the world except for the United States. They've lived, fought, and died alongside of all of us. And we simply have to care, to a certain extent, at least, about this relationship that we have, so many of us, frankly, have invested in over the years. There's one other note that I do want to say. There was one comment that I find very scary by someone who was on this call. And that was the comment was every country should have an expansion plan.
Oh, my God.
That is not the country that I live in.
No. We can't be expanding, guys. That's white supremacy.
And that is not the country that I want to be part of. I do not. Expansion of influence, absolutely. Yes. Expansion of influence in every way. But we do not live in a world of imperialism anymore. And that is something I think that we in the West have fought against over and
Yes. No to imperialism. No to white supremacy. No to cisgender heterosexism. Now, there's been some misinformation given out there about Rebecca Lobach by myself. And I think I mentioned this post previously about the flight path of the Black Hawk helicopter and nearly crashed into two other planes along the way and then changed direction at the last minute just before crashing into the American Airlines flight. All right, not or totally correct. So what you need to know is that it didn't crash into two other planes. This is disinformation here because readers added context, and in the reader context they say color represents altitude, so they're at significantly different altitudes. So I think I passed along this misinformation, and I felt really bad about it. She wasn't just trying to take out a whole variety of planes along the way to her successful kill shot. There were different altitudes, so really nothing to see here. I mean, yeah, she was flying erratically, right? She was obviously flying incompetently. So you can focus on the negative if you want to, right? So this is an email to Alex Berenson. So this helicopter piloted by Rebecca Lobach. Yeah, it demonstrated an erratic flight path, so fine. Haters of DEI, focus on the negative. It executed two 90-degree turns, turning west off course. So given the airspace, this is indicative of inexperience, unfamiliarity, and incompetence on the part of Rebecca Lobach, if you want to get all white supremacist and, like, if you're into mansplaining. The inability of the pilot to maintain the proper altitude, especially on a clear night, is highly indicative of aircraft unfamiliarity, lack of recent flying, gross incompetence, likely exacerbated by the unpracticed use of the night vision goggles. But look at things from her side. Military pilots love to do low-level flying, especially in cool places like up the Potomac River, by Washington, D.C. at night, and they love taking risks. I mean, think about what an adrenaline rush this was for her. And one of her co-pilots had an eye stigmatism. The warrant officer instructor pilot may have had a possible hesitancy to correct a female captain of unknown qualifications, experience, and rank. Yeah, you're not going to be able to discipline women in the military the same way that you discipline blokes. Zero accountability for the American commuter pilots. They did exactly what they should. So this Potomac corridor should not be one used to train new and experienced pilots. And I sure hope that Rebecca Lobach earned her place in the unit based on merit, though it's impossible to see how that could possibly be true. Now, yeah, you look at the videos, guys, and you think, oh man, she deliberately ran into that commuter flight, but maybe she was just incompetent, right? She was probably just in over her head. I mean, haven't you ever been in over your head? Right? Maybe she just had difficulty seeing at night. And yeah, she was way above 200 feet from the ground. She was where she shouldn't be. Right? She was recruited. She was promoted for political reasons. She got in with the lesbian mafia. She didn't get ahead on her competence. But let's think about what's going on here, right? The women who enlist in the military are disproportionately lesbians. So DEI quotas mean that they get promoted disproportionately, and they promote each other, right? They help each other. They give each other a helping hand, a helping scissoring. So, of course, a progressive administration is going to look to someone like Rebecca to provide window dressing and proof that their progressive policies, when imposed on the military, do no harm. So, there we are. And here we are. And we're in it together, guys. We're in it together.
You know, one thing I should do more. I'm starting this like it's a Spalding Gray monologue. I'm not even introducing it, just going right into it. One thing I should do.
I like that. I like that. I think I need to do that. I think I need to do my shows like a Spalding Gray monologue. Just go right into it. No introducing. It was like a dark and stormy night. Now, it was a dark and clear night when Rebecca Lobach decided to get in some hours on the Black Hawk helicopter.
Do more is talk more about the media business because people are fascinated by it. One thing in the media business, there's a lot of jargon. Right? Some jargon goes from newsroom to newsroom. Some jargon only has applicability to one place. So at ABC, where I worked, the place where the anchor and the senior producers and the writers sat was called the Rim. And at CBS, they called it the Fishbowl. No, what they called it at NBC.
It did not have a name for it because it didn't exist right? in terms of the structure of the desks.
Yeah, so pretty.
Well, it all sounds very penis and cisgendered to me.
Interesting, right? Again, let's review. CBS, Fishbowl, ABC, The Rim, NBC, no name. Incredible. Okay, so here's a term applicable to all newsrooms. If you have, like, in a newscast, like a bunch of stories that don't really have, like, a big connection, like cats and dogs. I know that's not specific to the news business. People use that expression in general, cats and dogs, but I'm going to start with the cats and dogs because the two big stories are going to take us some time. We have two things.
Who was piloting the helicopter when it collided with the passenger jet? Rebecca Lobach, Joe Biden aide.
Fantastic guest tonight, Melissa DeRosa and Kristen.
Oh,
Kristen.
Come on.
Oh, man. Kristen Davison, thank you. It's my old age. I can't remember any names. Kristen Davison and Melissa DeRosa. The two big stories are the two wars we talked about this morning on the morning meeting. One is Trump's war against Canada and Mexico with the tariffs. Spoiler alert, both countries caved today, as my sources said they would. So there are going to be no tariffs for at least 30 days, apparently, although Trump could change his mind again. But we'll talk through that. That's one big story. The other is Elon Musk's war on the federal government and the deep state and the entrenched bureaucracy, particularly USAID, about which there's lots to say. But so we'll get to those two big stories and we'll talk about them with our guests. But let me do the cats and dogs. All right. First of all, and this is not really a minor thing, major developments on the.
Okay, we'll get to those major developments soon.
I want to make deals. They've been abusers. I'd go right now, reciprocal tariffs on everybody.
The tariff sheriff puts the world on notice.
There is a black woman at this podium, and I deserve your attention.
I need your support.
We are sick and tired of
The Democrats didn't get it together.
The Democratic Party looks so pathetic after this election, I might entertain running. $50,000 to do a transgender opera in Colombia, $47,000 to do a trans comic book in Peru, $20,000 a pop to do drag shows in Ecuador.
Sorry, guys, the party's over.
They turn out to be radical left lunatics.
Plus,
welcome to the Gulf of America. Oh, wait, I can't say that.
you can't say he didn't warn you. Mass deportations, caravans making U-turns, migrants sleeping at Gitmo instead of 4-star hotels. DEI destroyed, bureaucracy slashed, FBI purges and foreign aid cuts. More on that later. California's reservoirs are even filling up, and wind farms off the Jersey Shore canceled. Countries are learning a very important word in the English language: respect. Colombia did a 180 after tariff threats and started taking back their bad hombres. And after flipping Biden the bird, Venezuela is taking their migrants back too. All it took was a trip by Rick Grinnell, who flew home with 6 American hostages. What'd we give up? Nothing. Up next, Panama.
Secretary of State Rubio is in Panama right now, and we're talking about the Panama Canal. What they've done is terrible. They violated the agreement. They're not allowed to violate the agreement. China's running the Panama Canal. That was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement, and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen.
After Rubio's first visit, Panama ripped up the canal contract with China's Belt and Road Initiative. Trump also started a trade war with Mexico and Canada, a 25% tariff on all imports. Democrats pretended it was economic Armageddon. Chuck Schumer said, "What about my cerveza?"
What's that going to mean? Higher prices. Higher prices for New Yorkers, higher prices for Americans. It's going to affect almost everything. Let's just take Super Bowl Sunday, okay? It's going to affect beer, okay? Most of it, Corona here, comes from Mexico. It's going to affect your guac, because what is guacamole made of? Avocados, both from Mexico.
Before Chuck could put down the avocados, the Mexican president buckled and agreed to send 10,000 Mexican soldiers to the southern border to stop migrants and fentanyl. In exchange, Trump paused tariffs on Mexico for a month if they behave.
So the call with Mexico went very well in the sense that they're very strong now on the border.
Did you blink this morning?
There was no blinking. No, she's a wonderful woman, but she did agree to 10,000 soldiers on the border. I would say that's a lot. Would you say that's pretty good? 10,000 soldiers on the border?
Sir,
and the 10,000 soldiers are going to keep illegal aliens out. There was no blanking. No, and they're going to keep them out, seriously out, and otherwise they're going to have a big penalty. Mexico's going to be penalized.
Yeah, Trump got Mexicans help to secure the border and slow down mass migration and drug overdoses. But for a few hours there, it looked like we might have had to pay 10 cents more for guac. China's backdooring cars and dumping cheap steel through Mexico. And the cartels are funneling fentanyl and illegals into the United States. If countries are going to wage economic and drug warfare on us, why have we been waving the white flag? Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth went down to the southern border today and said this:
border security is national security. Guys and gals of my generation have spent decades in foreign countries guarding other people's borders. It's about time we secure our own border. Mission accomplished means 100% operational control of the border. Right now, that means a surge of manpower. To the cartels, all options are on the table.
Trump's DEA chief is vowing to build a multinational army of good to fight evil. So Mexico's not off the hook just yet. And neither is Canada. They were next.
Canada's been very abusive of the United States for many years. They don't allow our banks. Did you know that? Canada does not allow banks to go in. If you think about it, that's pretty amazing. If we have a U.S. bank, they don't allow them to go in. Canada's been very tough on oil, on energy. They don't allow our farm products in, essentially. They don't allow a lot of things in, and we allow everything to come in. It's been a one-way street. We subsidize Canada by the tune of about $200 billion a year. And for what? What do we get out of it? We don't get anything out of it.
American banks in Canada are barely allowed to lend money, and they can't even accept deposits less than 6 figures. Canada dumps cheap lumber into the U.S., and it erects major duties on American dairy farmers. Plus, they're delinquent on NORAD and NATO, so it's time to pay up. Canada tried to hold out and just ended up begging for mercy.
Americans have to understand how hurt and, frankly, how furious Canadians are. Our sovereignty is being challenged, and so, yeah, regular Canadians across the country are coming up with ways to stand for Canada, to fight for Canada, to defend Canada, but mostly to say to our American neighbors, guys, just cut it out. Just stop it. This is a terrible idea.
Well, our first mistake was begging for mercy on CNN, not Fox. Everybody knows Trump doesn't watch that channel. We're even seeing trade war propaganda on Canadian SNL.
What the hell are you doing?
What?
That's Heinz ketchup.
So?
It's American. Buy French's. It's Canadian. We're in a trade war, you traitor.
I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Mrs. Butterworth? You were going to buy American maple syrup?
Oh. Okay, that costs way more.
So does freedom.
Canada needs us more than we need them. Over 75% of Canadian exports come here. They can't win a trade war with us. They know it, Trump knows it, and there's only one way out.
Look, what I'd like to see, Canada become our 51st state. We give them protection, military protection. We don't need them to build our cars. I'd rather see Detroit or South Carolina or any one of our Tennessee, any one of our states build the cars. They could do it very easily. We don't need them for the cars. We don't need them for lumber. We don't need them for anything. We don't need them for energy. We have more energy than they do. We don't need them for energy. So I say, why are we doing this? Why are we willing to lose between $100 billion and $200 billion a year? We don't need them.
But before I even got on the set for The Five, Governor Trudeau crawled to the table. Quote, I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. Canada caved. And in exchange, Trump paused tariffs for 30 days. There was no inflation. There was no recession. The market closed pretty much flat. But we've been told tariffs don't work and that Trump's trade wars are reckless. Well, so far, every country that's been threatened bent the knee, and we haven't conceded a thing. And if tariffs are eventually enacted, American consumers have a choice. We don't have to pay for Corona. We can buy Bud, just not Bud Light. Tariffs encourage Americans to buy American. And it encourages multinationals, if they don't want to get hit with a tariff, to have their products made in America. That boosts American jobs and wages. Europe's next.
We have massive deficits with the European Union, massive, like $350 billion, if you can believe it. They don't take our farm product. They don't take our cars. They don't take almost anything, but we take their cars. We have millions of cars coming in, BMW and Mercedes-Benz and Volkswagen and just so many different cars, and we don't do anything about that. How many Chevrolets or Fords do you see in the middle of Munich? And the answer is none, because they don't take any cars. They don't take anything. So the European has abused the United States for years, and they can't do that.
The Europeans have a 10% tariff on American cars. We know what the U.S. tariffs European cars. 2.5%. America should never accept bad trade terms, especially when we pay to defend Europe. You can already see how the European trade war is going to end. They'll drop their duties on American car imports, pay their NATO dues, and German car plants are going to shift to South Carolina or Tennessee. And Greenland's destiny is also a part of this negotiation. We see you up there. There's a new sheriff in town, the tariff sheriff. You combine economic power with gunboat diplomacy, and you could put together a new world order based on America first.
Every single one of those countries is dying to make a deal. You know why? Because they're ripping us off really badly. And the United States is tired of just being ripped off. And that's why we have $36 trillion in debt. We have it for a reason, because we make bad deals with everybody. And we don't allow that anymore. In the end, you're going to see that either very, very substantial tariffs are going to be paid by them, or they're going to make some kind of a deal.
With Trump, there's always a deal to be made. He just announced from the Oval that Ukraine will have to sign over rare earth minerals in exchange for our generous support.
We're telling Ukraine they have very valuable rare earth. We want what we put up to go in terms of a guarantee. We want a guarantee. We're handing them money hand over fist. We're giving them equipment. European is not keeping up with us. They should equalize. And look, we have an ocean in between. They don't. So we're looking to do a deal with Ukraine where they're going to secure what we're giving them with their rare earth and other things.
Lithium, uranium, titanium. There's just some of the rare earth minerals that Ukraine has that are critical to the future of the American economy and our national security. We can't let China dominate this space. A powerful economic message is being sent. And on Saturday, the world heard a powerful military one. Trump ordered airstrikes against ISIS leaders in Somalia. American commanders are being unshackled by the timid rules of engagement placed on them by Biden. Our enemies will be taken out early and quickly, preventing big wars by winning small battles. The rupture you're experiencing, the whiplash you're witnessing, is a commander-in-chief with vision on a mission and a young cavalry in the cabinet to execute action fast.
We have great, great people coming in. I think I'd like to say the best ever recruited for government. I think we have the finest people ever recruited for government. You're starting to see that because we've done more in 2 weeks than Biden's done in 5 years, 6 years. They could be here between him and Obama. You add it up, okay? We've done more in 2 weeks than they've done in 12 years.
Joe Biden liked to say, never bet against the United States. But other countries were, and they were winning by betting against Biden. And now that the big guy's gone and the tariff sheriff's in charge, there's law and order here at home and abroad. Host of Making Money, Charles Payne, joins me now. All right, Charles, we were told tariffs don't work, trade wars are lose-lose. What happened?
I was watching Mark Halperin's show on buying Greenland, and there was a phrase used on that show. Tell me if you've heard it before. Moving at the speed of Trump. So how fast are you moving these days? Well, I was running late, so I started moving at the speed of Trump. Another thing I heard from comic Matt Ruby, that DEI is the new N-word. So I moved over to the other side of the street when I saw that DEI. God forbid. And all right, I want to give you guys prep against misinformation. So this is like a condom for your mind. So you're ready to put a condom on your mind, a prophylactic, a rubber. All right, so let's put into X and Black Hawk flight path. And probably a lot of misinformation here. So it claims that Rebecca Lobach was warned twice she was off path and flying in a no-fly zone to commercial flights. Probably misinformation. So how does a Black Hawk fail to evade the flight path of a massive airliner? Yeah, my instinct would be, if I were in a Black Hawk and I was a little bit concerned about what was going on, I'd think maybe let's just stop, right? Let's just stop and hover for a while and figure things out before we go flying around and stuff. So apparently this is the Black Hawk's flight path. Was it trying multiple times to get in a crash? No, these weren't near misses because they're on different altitudes. That's misinformation. Look at the flight path. These two jogs, if had continued straight, they almost certainly would have missed the flight. Instead, the helicopter, the Black Hawk, turned into it. Yeah, it does seem weird that the Black Hawk was turning into that flight path. Painful to watch. 3 near misses before fatal crash. I'm pretty sure that's misinformation, guys. They're on different altitudes. Erratically moves back towards civilian flight paths. Look, we all make mistakes. Ends up flying to where passengers' planes are packed. Well, that's the most exciting place. That's where you want to go. That's when you really feel something. Like, look, I'm sure we've all, at times, we've tried to get to sleep and we're trying to rub one out and we can't quite rub one out. So God forbid people, I shouldn't go into this, but God forbid people do things to feel well hung. But, I mean, you want to do it reasonably and responsibly. But you go where the adrenaline is, right? The passenger planes, or you get well hung. And, like, just think about how exciting that would have been. Like, right there on the Potomac. This collision appears intentional. Probably misinformation, guys. Look how the helicopter turned into the path of the airplane instead of away from it. Yeah, the helicopter was on a really weird flight path. Does not illustrate much competency. It deviates away from the required track. I should have flown the flight path seen in white, but deviated from the approved flight plan. Why? Well, maybe it was more exciting to get, where the action is. Don't you ever want to be like where the action is, Isn't there a song about, I want to fly so high, I'm in a helicopter and there are all these passenger planes passing me by. I want to get high, I want to get the passenger planes. Like, I've had dreams that I'm messing around with balloons and I'm sitting in a chair and the balloons like take flight and I've taken up to 30,000 feet. In my dreams, I'm not having problems breathing, and I go across the Pacific Ocean, finally land in New Zealand, and while I'm flying around there in my balloon, right, there are all these passenger planes going by, and it was really cool. Okay, flying too high outside of its approved path when it collided, and the helicopter acknowledged how they were getting too close to the plane, yet somehow collided with it anyway after being warned. So the air traffic control tower had given the helicopter pilot permission to fly no higher than 200 feet. Boom. She wanted to go where the action was, man. Black Hawk was flying at 175% of the 200-foot ceiling. Why did it appear to try to hit 3 other planes? That's misinformation, guys. Don't fall for misinformation. Right, they're at different altitudes. 3 near misses. Again, all this misinformation, right? This is like, I'm like prep. Right, 7,100 feet. 4,375 feet and 4,050 feet of vertical separation before the crash with 150 feet of vertical separation. Radically moves because helicopter tracking, somewhat crude, ends up flying along the Potomac. Huh. This guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. What else does he have? Okay, I guess I should prepare before shows, not during shows. My bad. I just want to be where the action is, man. Oh! So lift me up where we belong. That, like an officer and a gentleman, right? That movie is really about, is like a heterosexist, cisgendered version of the Rebecca Lobach story, right? An officer and a gentleman. So lift me up where we belong. I mean, that's what was going on for her, right? Who knows what tomorrow brings in a world, few hearts, or airline passengers survive. This is her anthem. This is Rebecca Lobach's anthem. All I know is the way I feel. When it's real, I keep it alive. The flight path is long and boring, so I'm going to make it more exciting. There are civilian air traffic planes in our way, and there's a 200 feet ceiling, but we just keep climbing. We climb a step every day because lesbian love lifts us up where we belong, where the eagles cry on a mountain high. Love lifts us up where we belong, far from the world below, up where the clear winds blow and the civilian airline flights are just whizzing by. Right? Some boring people, they hang on to what the flight path says. You know, those blokes following rules and stuff like a cisgendered male. Right? They live their lives looking at the flight path and following the rules and not going up above, 200 feet. Look, all we have is here and now. All our lives out there to find. The flight path is long and boring. And there are all these rules in our way and old-fashioned notions of excellence. But jump aboard the DEI rocket, guys. We climb a step every day. DEI love lifts us up where we belong, where the eagles cry, where the civilian airliners crash, right? DEI love lifts us up where we belong, far from the humdrum world of competence that we know. Like, let's get higher together, right? Where the clear winds blow and the passenger airlines fly. Time goes by. This is no time to cry. Life's you and I. We're alive today until we run into that airplane. Right? DEI lifts us up where we belong, far from the humdrum world of competence that we know. What a beautiful song. God, I'm getting pretty, I'll admit, I'm getting pretty choked up right now just thinking about it. Right, let's look at the flight path, the intended flight path, and the actual flight path. Well, look, she worked in the Biden White House. You think she was going to be paying attention to rules and other cisgendered notions? I don't think so. What we need is to just fly, to get higher, to allow love to lift us up. Right? Love is the solution.
America's sprinting into the golden age, and Democrats don't know what to do. One strategist said, quote, Trump is eating us for lunch. And for the most part, we're letting him. It's not that Democrats don't want to resist. They just don't know how. They're stuck in the past. They think they can name call their way to winning.
The problem is that Americans thought that it was okay to take a full-fledged criminal and make him the president of the United States, and then they want to act aghast when he does criminal things. Let me tell you, we have a thug in charge of the United States, and if we don't wake up, we may not have a United States, because right now he has only been successful in being a divider in chief.
After 10 years of hoaxes and smears, Trump's bulletproof. So Democrats are arguing whether to talk about eggs or Hitler. They're fighting each other. They're not fighting for you. One Democrat said this, 20 big cities, Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, that's what's left of the Democratic Party. And I'm not exactly sure those 20 big cities are getting the best version of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is in such a weak position that folks with no political experience are like, why not me?
I doubt I'll ever run. It's not me. I live a pretty good life, and I don't want to ruin it by getting involved in politics. But I got to tell y'all something. The Democratic Party looks so pathetic after this election, I might entertain running.
Carville says go for it, Stephen A. You couldn't do worse than Kamala.
We ran a presidential election. If we were playing the Super Bowl, we started our seventh-string quarterback. That's what happened. Okay, you can't address a problem unless you're honest about a problem. Now, if you were to put the staggering talent that exists in today's Democratic Party, you heard what I said? The staggering talent that exists in today's Democratic Party, and people would have seen that, that are going, I didn't know they had people like that can actually complete a sentence, okay, that actually can know how to frame a message, that actually have a sense of accomplishment of doing something.
Well, this weekend we got to see some of the Democrats' staggering talent. They held auditions to run the DNC. Here was the first question.
So I'm going to, I have a show of hands. How many of you believe that racism and misogyny played a role in Vice President Harris's defeat? Okay. So that's good. You all passed.
Okay. Then they all made it to round two. Next question.
Will you pledge to appoint more than one transgender person to an at-large seat, and will you commit to making sure those appointments reflect the gender and ethnic diversity of the transgender community?
Since Carol wanted to ask us if everybody, would everybody here commit to that, or is there anyone who wouldn't? Raise your hand if you would commit to what she just asked. Okay.
After calling the country sexist and racist and promising to bring back DEI, they got down to policy.
It is my desire to be the next DNC chair, and I just want to give you all a little bit of something that's been on my heart here over the last couple of days. You fight on, you fight on, you fight on, you fight on. When your government is doing you wrong, you fight on, oh, you fight on.
Then they started dancing. Trump has the YMCA. Democrats have the Cupid Shuffle. The talent portion ended, and one Democrat actually had a good idea. Listen.
If I'm your chair, I'm going to be very honest. And if we're going to be very honest, we have to look in the mirror, and we have to stop some of our hypocrisy. And one of our issues of hypocrisy is about money. We have to recognize that people see us as hypocrites.
The one Democrat with a good idea didn't get the gig. Another Democrat took the stage and basically said, oh, no, you didn't.
Hello, Democrats. Hey, I am speaking, and I would love your attention. There is a black woman at this podium, and I deserve your attention like the 11 people who went before me. Yes, I am speaking.
Democrats were ready to elect their new leader, but they had to stop the count. Gender violation.
Our rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 offices must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender.
We don't know what any of that means. But at the end of the day, they picked a straight white guy to run the party. His name's Ken Martin, and he loves DEI.
What factors should go into deciding what the 2028 calendar should be? And is diversity important to you?
Absolutely it is. And I would just say that's what we have to start with, is making sure whatever calendar we put forward respects the traditions and diversity of our Democratic Party.
Democrats have had 3 months since the election to get it together, but they haven't learned a thing. A Republican won the popular vote for the first time in decades. The country's demanding less inflation, DEI, and migrants, and more common sense. And all the Democrats are doing is dancing on their own graves. Sage Steele's the host of the Sage Steele Show. So singing and dancing is not usually what you think is a quality.
So I like James Carville referring to Kamala Harris as the 7th-string quarterback. I guess Rebecca Lobach was like the 7th-string Black Hawk pilot who was promoted to captain on the basis of what exactly? Okay, interesting. Put into X, Black Hawk flight path. But I don't want to be too one-dimensional. This is important. So normally, what in America is called Social Security, in pretty much every other first world country, the equivalent of Social Security is invested into the stock market or the bond market, and people get much higher returns. It's absolutely criminal that the funds for United States Social Security is not invested. It just sits there, right, like a seventh-string quarterback who's just been knocked out, right? It's pathetic, right? And doggone it, George W. Bush was right. People should have the option of investing their retirement in some combo investment fund, an American Global Wealth Fund, right? We need these things. We need them now. But politicians lack the courage. But I do not lack the courage. I am here. I will speak. I am a cisgendered white male, and you will listen to me.
My name is John. I'm from Alexandria. I'm a retired economist. And boy, have I got questions for you.
Hi, John.
Number one, what do you think about the idea of, instead of Social Security being put into bonds, why not equity? Because it grows faster. That's question number one.
That would be great. I mean, it'd be great if it was even put into bonds. Right, it's not put into bonds. It just sits there.
And Senator Cassidy was working on a very thoughtful plan that was going to do that, and President Bush tried to do it. The Democratic Party calls it, a risky scheme, rather than leveraging a compound interest.
But we know how the stock market's
Of course,
gone.
but the Democratic Party won't let it happen.
Even if you put it in a bond, which I know you said it's a better deal. A passbook savings account at the credit union is a better deal.
Even under the mattress might somehow grow.
Of course, unless we default on our debt because we don't want to raise the debt ceiling, like that might not be. It is hard to say to people. I mean, look.
Make it optional.
A lot of people here just went through the financial crisis.
Okay.
So people get nervous.
Make it optional. Who could object to being optional?
So, you know what the funny thing is? There was a similar experiment that happened that was unreported, but in the military, most people went into a system where you got 20 years, you got to retire, right? I don't know what it was, 7, 8 years ago. They do now, it's called blended retirement. They gave people coming into the military the option of basically getting a 401k because most people were like, I'm not going to stay in for the 20, right? And no one said a word because they were like, this makes a heck of a lot of sense. And I think that we underestimate the American people if we did it in a way that protected current retirees, which is what Bush had proposed, but make it a lot simpler, which is right. And I get it. There's a much better way of doing it. But if we can keep it simple, that would be. I just don't think President Trump right now wants to take it on. Maybe if we maintain a Republican House in the final 2 years. I'm sorry, Dan. And then
Yeah, look, the right thing would be to do stuff like this. Would be to put everything on the table, but it's so darn politically easy.
Just show of hands real quick. Is there anybody that would just, you don't have to say why, I'm not going to call anyone.
I can't see
but was there anybody that if the president announced today, current retirees for the next 15 years wouldn't get touched, but then you'd have the option of investing it in a government-controlled account, would anyone say no to that? Just hands up. There you go.
I mean, look, though, we've all watched focus groups, and Trump watched them, or his team did. There is a reason he said I would not touch it.
Oh, I know.
I mean, it is so
hard. Whole vote.
Yeah. We're going to get to your other two questions in a second, but more news or fun facts.
Okay.
Who was the first Latin American nation to join the Belt and Road Initiative in 2017? Panama.
Okay. Let's see. What else have I got lined up? The tariff madness.
From school shooting for most of his career. Went to Harvard. Can't seem to spell, judging by a lot of his social media
Talking about David Hogg, right? The relentless rise of the mediocre.
posts. But he's the future of the Democratic Party. We had the land acknowledgments. We had the multiple genders.
Well, we should say that the DNC had its annual meeting.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Where it had to elect new leadership.
New leadership, yes.
In the wake of the election.
And they polled the people who were there and said, how many of you think racism and misogyny was the reason Kamala Harris lost? All the hands enthusiastically went up. So the shorts or the TLDR, they've learned nothing. And I think if you watched any of the Grammy Awards last night, Hollywood also has learned nothing. So we have kind of a weird stasis on the left. And however, we have people like Josh Shapiro, Fetterman, others. There are people in the party who I think aren't happy, Richie Torres, people who aren't happy with seeing the party elect this kind of leadership. And I'll leave it to John, Matt, and Abe to describe how powerful the DNC is in any case, but it was sort of hilarious for conservatives after this sort of revolutionary return of Trumpism to the White House and, capturing all three branches of government. The Democrats are still talking about the pronouns.
Well, it is very important that you mention Fetterman and Shapiro, because Dan Balls of the Washington Post has a piece today about a report written in part by William Galston by the organization called Third Way. So Third Way is sort of remains the effort to find a place in the center for the Democratic Party that is neither, sort of like a rubber stamp fake Trump saying they're Democrats, or isn't AOC, land acknowledgement, Bernie, whatever. And they say that the only path forward for the Democrats, given their loss of the working class, their total dependence now on the college educated, who make up, 32% of the American populace, as opposed to 68% that does not have a college degree. It's great to have supporters, but you want to be closer to the 68% than the 32%, particularly if that does seem to be a cultural fault line in which people have different interests, making the point that because Democrats are now far more affluent, they did not feel the effects of inflation during the Biden period and therefore did not know how central that issue was.
This was the lawn sign, Harris Waltz, obviously. This captures all of that, yes.
Yeah. And what Galston and his colleague, I can't remember who his co-author are.
It's Elaine Kamarck.
Oh, it's Elaine Kamarck. I'm sorry.
They co-wrote The Politics of Evasion after the 84 election, which created the blueprint for Clinton and Gore and the Third Way, the original Third Way.
Yeah, I apologize. Anyway, they say the model to follow is the state of Pennsylvania, because there are all these other places that were swing states that have gone totally red, but Pennsylvania remains a swing state, and it is the classic swing state, right? Went for Trump, but it has a Democratic governor. It has a Democratic, it has Fetterman as this, and the Democratic governor and the Democratic senator are heterodox figures within their own party. And if the Democratic Party does not open itself up to heterodoxy in ways that appeal to voters in their states that they need in order to get out of the ghetto that they're in, which is red states and cities, and that's it, and they have no feel for anywhere else in the country, they are doomed.
But here's the thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're talking here about strategic thinkers.
Right.
They make up a tiny fraction of left liberalism. The folks at the DNC are true believers. They have to believe that what they have been preaching is wrong before they drop it. It doesn't matter that analysis would show that moving toward heterodox thinking would broaden the appeal of the party. The party is dominated by that kind of true believer thinking, especially now that Trump's in office. The idea is we're supposed to look at our own ways now at the moment of a crisis like this.
Successful presidents run against their own party. Obama ran against the Clinton dynasty on the issue of Iraq. Bill Clinton ran against the paleo-liberals of the 1980s on welfare, on affirmative action, on crime, a whole host of issues. Reagan ran against the Nixon-Ford-Bush Republicans, right? Supply-side economics, confrontation, not détente with the Soviet Union. And Trump ran.
Okay, so many glorious things going on.
Money they were giving to people that shouldn't be getting it, and to agencies and others that shouldn't be getting it. It was a shame. I love the concept, but they turned out to be radical left lunatics. And the concept of it is good, but it's all about the people.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says USAID is done spending like drunken sailors.
One of the most common complaints you will get if you go to embassies around the world from State Department officials and ambassadors and the like is USAID is not only not cooperative, they undermine.
Trump is moving at the speed of Trump. All right, there's serious talk now about getting rid of the education department.
The work that we're doing in that country. They're completely uncooperative. They won't tell you what the programs are. They refuse to answer questions. They try to push through payments. Even after the executive order, they were still trying to push money through the system.
USAID probably has good reason for wanting to keep the auditors out. It's been an intelligence cutout for decades. In the 70s, the CIA funneled millions to Laotian paramilitaries through USAID. We used it to pay off Pakistan during the war on terror, and they hid bin Laden from us the whole time. And just a few years ago, they tried to foment a Cuban uprising with fake social media. Elon Musk says, quote, it became apparent that it's not an apple with a worm in it. What we have is just a ball of worms. We've got to basically get rid of the whole thing. It's beyond repair. We are shutting it down. Wait until you hear about all this crazy pet project stuff they had. Ready? $2.5 million to promote DEI in Serbia, a transgender opera in Colombia, a DEI musical in Ireland, and a trans comic book in Peru. Oh, and $40 million to fund gain of function in Wuhan. Now that DOGE is getting rid of crooked pet projects, Democrats are melting down.
We are witnessing a constitutional crisis. We talked about Trump wanting to be a dictator on day one, and here we are.
I want to apologize. I want to say I'm sorry that you have to put up with this offensive coming out of this White House.
If you want to know how an unelected shadow government operates, look no further than DOGE.
We are living a nightmare created by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and we need to wake up.
They are seizing the tools you need for a coup.
Democrats couldn't muster any emotion for funding hurricane victims. They spent years on the sidelines while Americans suffered under Bidenomics. But you take one trans Peruvian comic book and they lose their mind. Outnumbered co-host and former White House press secretary Kayleigh McEnany is here.
Okay, that's pretty funny. That's pretty good, man. Jesse Waters.
It's fulfilling a historic place in helping the separation of powers, having the American government run the way the American government is supposed to run. That is a huge problem.
And can I just add on to that? Because the federal government now, with a few exceptions, farm programs, pensions, the military, the rest of the federal government serves Democrats. That's what it is. It finances Democrats and Democratic interests. And so there's this weird dynamic now, and it was visible in the OMB spending freeze. The Democrats were the ones up in arms because it was their people, their programs that were being affected. Republicans will get angry if there's confusion about Social Security and Medicare. And that's why I think the OMB memo was rescinded last week, as many Republican lawmakers were hearing from their constituents a scared of, hold it, what about my check is coming, right? Or what about my veterans' health care? But for the most part, much of the federal government is basically another branch of the Democratic Party.
Wow, that's a great line. Much of the federal government is another branch of the Democratic Party. Okay, this is one of the software engineers working with Elon Musk on DOGE to reduce our country's excessive spending problem, unfathomably based. Here we go.
This is what I do most of my work from. The Rake School and just the University of Nebraska as a whole has provided a great educational background where I can then, take these skills that I've learned and apply them to problems like this. I just spend hours upon hours staring at flattened pieces of the scroll like this, trying to find these patterns which are part of the writing. At the start of the challenge, we had not been able to find any writing at all.
Yes, this is the Roman Empire to fascism pipeline, guys. Watch out.
We had these guys studying it, and then I did some reporting and had another reporter working on it. And it was this big apparatus that we were able to uncover. And then seemingly it disappeared, it dissipated. They couldn't mobilize anyone. And so it's interesting because you have these formal institutions on the left and organizations and trainings and rhetoric, but they're almost entirely dependent on public energy. And so, 2016 or 2020, they were able to kind of ride the wave. But when that energy dissipates, it's a totally different story. And on the other side, on the Trump side, I think certainly it's Stephen Miller, amazing. It's a lot of the people at AFPI.
And how do you get energy? You get energy from other people by finding the common ground and then developing a synchronicity, a rhythm.
The America First Policy Institute, which was chaired by Linda McMahon, now Education Secretary. Yeah. But they had a huge team, and essentially what it was an administration in waiting. And these guys were there doing the detailed planning, policy writing, workshopping ideas. And then, of course, Russ Vaught's group, he's now director of Office of Management and Budget. He had a group called Center for Renewing America. And his whole focus was, how do we get rid of the woke and weaponized bureaucracy? And so this group of people who were really kind of thrust together in the first term in a totally chaotic manner had a chance to retreat, regroup, start actually planning. And the question among the policy team, up until, right before the inauguration, and I was asking them this because I really wanted to know, I said, well, what's the likelihood that the president greenlights all of these ideas that you've been coming up with for 4 years? And they said, of course, on background, can't attribute any names. They said, look, the president is an instinctual creature, and we don't even know. We have no idea what he's going to do.
Okay,
I think
there's
it's
this murderous trans cult that Andy No has been reporting on.
And this will segue us nicely. It's like this dystopian future of America where the bottom drops out, history is erased, and you have two warring tribes, the kind of genderless, left-wing, activist archetype, and then you have the kind of the striver, engineer, kind of completely uncreative and unindividualistic type. It's like that's the society we don't want on either end. We've got to have that American spirit. And so the last story I want to talk about, and this is one that is coming out of left field for me, for you, I think, and for everyone else. There is a cult. I grew up in Sacramento. You grew up in the East Bay, so we're kind of like we're from the same region, and so you've probably driven through Vallejo many times. Oh, yeah. And there's a compound in Vallejo that was essentially occupied by a number of male to female transgender computer scientists who had adopted an ideology of radical rationalism based on some kind of esoteric Silicon Valley ideology. And lo and behold, they've been implicated, or at least allegedly involved, in a string of murders. I mean, in some sense, this is extremely American, right? Religious cults, murder, California. I mean, this is a replay of a lot of the stories that we all know. But there's something really interesting about this. Has this been on your radar? Oh, and if so, what is your take on it? Yeah.
The other, they're also part of this rationalist movement, which.
Okay, so you get lost in this abstract world. And
trans terror cell operating within the U.S. And can a number of homicides be pinned on this alleged terror cell? Our first guest tonight says soberly yes to both questions. He reports, quote, an elderly Pennsylvania couple was murdered in a double homicide in January 2023. An 82-year-old California man was brutally stabbed to death on January 17, 2025. A U.S. Border Patrol officer was shot dead on January 20th, 2025 in Vermont. The cases are all allegedly linked, end quote. And he's surprised there isn't more media attention on the story. Joining us now to discuss his chilling and frankly tragic findings is Andy No, an independent journalist and a senior editor for The Post Millennial. He's also the author of Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Andy, thanks for being here tonight.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Great. So there's a lot here that you've uncovered, but first, to kind of get ourselves situated, can you walk us through the basic breakdown of who this main pair is, or I guess I should say was, since one of them is now deceased, and how it culminated into the tragic shooting of the Border Patrol agent that we all heard about on Trump's Inauguration Day?
So the story has now reached a point where it can no longer be ignored by the mainstream media. We are seeing reporting by AP, San Francisco Chronicle, and others about how the killing of the CBP officer was not isolated, allegedly, according to prosecutors. It's linked now to at least 5 other deaths. So the story is there was a trans duo on Inauguration Day who were allegedly involved in a deadly encounter with a Border Patrol officer in Vermont near the Canadian border. Initially, at first, the focus, at least in conservative media, was that the German national who died in the shootout may have been here on an expired H-1B visa. That's still a bit unclear, but what's emerged, as we've learned more about the female suspect, who's also transgender identifying, who was apprehended alive, is that both of them allegedly have links to a California-based transgender group, some call it a cult, that are allegedly involved in multiple homicides across the U.S. spanning back the last few years. And some of these killings are really horrific. The most recent one happened on the 17th of January involving an 82-year-old man in the Bay Area who was set to testify as a key witness in a murder and attempted murder trial against members of this group. The suspect who was just apprehended and charged over the alleged assassination of this elderly man is the fiance of the female who was apprehended in Vermont. And if you read the court documents, the weapons that were used in this shootout allegedly belong to an individual who is also transgender and is the child of a double homicide that happened in Pennsylvania. So there's been multiple people who have been killed. Several members of the group have died in their attacks on other people as well. So the story is really big. It's not being covered accurately because one big glaring omission in all the headlines, if you read in legacy media, is that nobody's reporting out that all of these individuals are transgender identifying in some way, and their extremist ideology includes aspects of transhumanism and, of course, transgenderism.
As you talk about the Vallejo man in California who was murdered quite recently, he had been attacked by members of this group before, right? I think maybe over rent. He lost his eye. So there you see him with both of his eyes. The other picture he showed of him, he was missing an eye, and then unfortunately he was then finally killed. But could you talk about that case a little more? Because
yeah, the story's confusing, I understand, and I've been trying to simplify it as best as I can, but it really, you can't, because it involves so many people. All of them have aliases, they have fake names, they have so-called dead names, so the legal name is different from what they identify as, and they're all transgender. So the case of Curtis Lint, that's the 82-year-old man who was brutally hacked to death and had his throat slit in the Bay Area on the 17th of January. He had survived narrowly another attempt on his life by members of this group in November of 2022. So during the pandemic, for several years, he had rented out his property, a plot of land, to this group, and they lived in box trucks on his property. And according to neighbors and what local media is reporting, was very bizarre in what they were doing. They would walk around wearing gas masks, and they set up solar panels. He said that he was ambushed in an attack by 3 members of this group, 3 transgender members, and they impaled him, and he had a firearm for self-defense. And lucky that he did, because he shot back and he killed one of them, a transgender person named Amir Burhanian, also known as Emma, and injured one of the others, and one was uninjured. So the 2 surviving attackers, alleged attackers, assailants, have an upcoming trial in April for attempted murder and other felony crimes. And he was the sole witness to that attack and also the survivor, and he's been killed.
Okay, that's some crazy stuff.
Is closely related to these Bay Area sort of intellectual movements, actually kind of adjacent to what like Curtis Yarvin came out of. These like 2010s era bloggers, Elier Yudkowsky, Less Wrong forums. They have since transitioned into AI safety. That's become like the big thing that the rationalists are interested in. And it's this, they're
AI
also
safety is
to,
this idea that AI will bring an apocalypse. It's like digital climate change, right? Is that the basic?
Yeah. There's this Swedish philosopher, Nicholas Bostrom, who, started inventing all these thought experiments about AGI. And like, you might have heard of a paperclip maximizer. And, it's like, okay, what are we going to do about AI if it exceeds our, own cognitive abilities, et cetera? The singularity, as like an existential event. And there's all these theories around that, and so they're also related to the effective altruists, which is something else viewers might have heard of, which is the ration, like what we're seeing, and this is like a very 2010s kind of movement, is after the new atheists in the early 2000s, there was this kind of loss of a kind of spiritual life. As we know, though, people need religion in some form. So like, what fills that God-shaped hole in people's souls? And a lot of these Bay Area types, also highly autistic in many cases, have like figured that rationalism is going to solve this problem of God for them. It's going to solve this problem of morals and values. And what this cult, so I only know a little bit about it as well, but their operating sort of moral principle is something they're calling like utilitarian extremism, or like extremist utilitarianism. And they've committed themselves to the variable of suffering of like any conscious creature as the thing that we're trying to like maximally diminish. Like our morality ought to maximally diminish the suffering of like cognizant beings, including animals and plants, even in some cases. And so they're like, they can justify, for example, murdering somebody because the murder of that person, whom let's say eats a lot of hamburgers, is that person's behavior is leading to the suffering of some number of like cows, that taken in aggregate, it has greater moral worth than that person's life. So just killing that person is like a moral act. These are obviously ideas that are not sustainable over the long term, but are indicative, I think, of something that we've seen before in history, which is as the left burns out of these like various cycles, these cultural cycles, and like wokeism in this case, starts to wane, what you see are not just retreats. Mostly it's retreat, but what you also see are sort of like psychotic, spasms throughout the culture that often result in violence, like Manson family style violence. So that seems to be what we're dealing with this cult. But what's your take on these people?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that it is a ideological splintering that then gets taken to logical extremes. And what's interesting about this particular story in my mind is that it seems to combine all of the various strands of our current moment. I mean, these people are all, transgender computer scientists, rationalists who were radicalized on a series of, high IQ, high autism blogs. But, two of these members allegedly were involved in the murder of a Border Patrol agent up in the Northeast. And they're involved in a series of murders and counter murders. That was this. They're all connected, allegedly. And murders and counter murders in the Bay Area. Some of them have faked their own deaths and then reemerged. It is this this kind of squirreling away of this energy, and the left can no longer mobilize on a mass scale. That was the lesson that, unfortunately, I spent a lot of money learning. Investigating the D.C. kind of above ground protest. It's such a great question, and actually very relevant. A friend who is a technology investor sent me a text this morning on the same topic. He said, hey, Trump is apparently letting go of 15,000 transgender military service members. Right. And he says, hey, what are we doing to reintegrate these folks? And he sent me some screenshots of the problem with de-Baathification. Meaning when the U.S. government took over Iraq and fired all the regime officials, then scattered them to the winds, they didn't reintegrate them, and they ended up creating violent insurgencies. And he says, look, this is not a specious comparison. Like, you're going to have, potentially, if that's what is happening, it's not clear exactly the status, but you're going to have 15,000 armed, trained, transgender military officials. What is to prevent them from splitting into this kind of Zizian cult-like atmosphere? And then you then go down the kind of list of extremity to the Kaiser Permanente gender-affirming care lady. There's a temptation to say, well, not my problem. These are their choices. They have to deal with it. Yeah. But it is our problem. Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, do they reabsorb into the economy elsewhere? Do they? I mean,
Chris,
detransition?
Okay.
This is okay. Good. This is what's been. It's been leading up to this moment, and
we spent an hour. Okay, waiting to get to this.
You spent more than an hour, because tell us also what you did in preparation for coming on today, related to Panda Express.
I tried. Yesterday, I drove to my local Panda Express, which is by the way, an hour drive from where I am. I live in the middle of nowhere.
Okay, what else do I have for you? What other cutting-edge insights do I have lined up?
Tulsi Gabbard front. Two of the senators who were thought to potentially be no votes, not just in the abstract, but by her own people, announced today they are yes. Number 9, please. Senator Langford of Oklahoma, who for whatever reason was thinking of being a no, tells the press today he's a yes. So there's one for Tulsi Gabbard. And then this is a big one, number 10, Susan Collins is also a yes. And she is on the Intelligence Committee. And so she'd been a no. There were some prospects that she would not get out of committee. We've said all along, if she gets out of committee on the floor, we think she'll be confirmed. There's one senator, basically, it appears, standing her way, even if Lisa Murkowski and Senator McConnell vote no. And that is Senator Young. Now, you'll recall over the weekend, Senator Young was attacked by Elon Musk. The two of them then had a phone call. Not sure the exact circumstance of how that happened. But according to sources familiar with the call, they didn't talk about Tulsi Gabbard. Senator Young's on the committee. Now, if he votes no, she doesn't get out of committee probably, unless she gets some Democrats, which she could. So he's the key right now. And he isn't saying, but my best source on this story says he's going to vote yes. In fact, two sources say that. So it appears right now that as compared to this morning, Tulsi Gabbard looks like she'll be confirmed. Big story. Second, Bobby Kennedy, his key senator, Young for Gabbard, remains Senator Cassidy of Louisiana, who is on both committees that heard testimony from him in his confirmation process. He told reporters today, still undecided. So Gabbard looks like, assuming she gets Young, she's fine. Kennedy still has to get the good doctor, and that is not clear. If he gets the doctor, he gets out of committee. I don't know that he's home free, probably is. So those two are looking better. All right. Today in the Oval Office, the president did another one of his patented bring in the press and just blah, 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 blah. Here's number 1, please. Here is the president recognizing a familiar face sitting on the side of the Oval Office, and the pool camera does yo person's work, making sure we can all see who the president's talking about. Roll 1, please.
The most talented people in the world. By the way, we just unrelated, but we have 2 of the most talented people in the world, the legendary Rupert Murdoch and Larry Ellison. So There are two legends in business, publishing, and probably every other. Rupert is Larry pretty much in a class by himself, right? I mean, although you may have a couple of bucks more, I don't know, but Rupert is in a class by himself. He's an amazing guy, and Larry is Larry's Larry. Larry's one of the most serious players anywhere in the world. So it's an honor to have you. This has nothing to do with you people, but they're here, and I thought it would be appropriate.
You notice Rupert is. You can dump out of this. You notice Rupert's not wearing a T-shirt and a vest from some leisure wear thing. Rupert's all dressed up. Looked great. All right, so there's that. Another cat and dog. Joe Biden today announced that he's going back for representation to Creative Artists Agency, one of Hollywood's top talent agencies who he worked with previously. They got him his book deal. I'm totally interested to see what CAA gets for this guy, kind of stuff he'll do. But Joe Biden is back with CAA. So that's another thing that happened today. All right. Again, the velocity, the pacing, the cadence of all the things they're doing is massive. So, for instance, today, Politico, number 11, I think it's Politico, number 11, reported, is this Politico? I think so. Now we're back to Donald Trump's going to dismantle the Department of Education. So that's a whole, maybe that's the Washington Post.
Washington Post and also Wall Street Journal.
Yeah. So that's a whole other thing we'll be looking at, is because the federal spending on education is like 7 or 10% of all spending on education. There's lots going on in that department that, if you got the DOGE sensibility, cross them out. One of the things the president signed today in the Oval Office was, this is number 4, please, a creation of a sovereign wealth fund. Lots of countries have sovereign wealth funds, but they're typically created with a country that has a budget surplus. They take the surplus and they create a sovereign wealth fund, and they use that to invest in big projects. The president said the U.S. sovereign wealth fund might buy TikTok, even though it's going to take a while for it to get stood up. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, spoke in language I didn't understand when he said where the money was going to come from. But here's the president talking about America's first. Oh, one more thing. The Biden administration talked about creating a sovereign wealth fund towards the end of Biden's time in office. So this idea has maybe bipartisan appeal. Here is number 4, please. Donald Trump talking about the creation of a sovereign wealth fund.
Next, this is an executive order. This charges your Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, and your Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, to begin a process that will hopefully result in the creation of an American sovereign wealth fund.
It's a very exciting event. We're going to have a sovereign wealth fund, which we've never had. We have a lot of things that create wealth, and you're seeing that over the last 2 weeks. I think we've created more wealth. Other people have created de-wealth. The people, my predecessors, we're creating a lot of wealth. Scott, maybe you'd like to say something about it, and I'd ask also Howard to say something about it.
Yes, sir. This is very exciting. We're going to stand this thing up within the next 12 months. We're going to monetize the asset side of the U.S. balance sheet for the American people.
It's the part I don't understand.
We're going to put the assets to work. And
all right, we can no disrespect to Scott Bessent, but we'll get out of here. I find it interesting that the guy who's being introduced to the Commerce Secretary hasn't been confirmed yet, but this is the Trump administration, so they do what they want. I was curious, because I know other countries have sovereign wealth funds. Noah, you got any idea? What country has the biggest sovereign wealth fund?
Norway.
What do you think? How'd you know that? How'd you know that?
I just know it. And
right,
probably after that, it's Singapore and Abu Dhabi.
China, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Iran, and Russia, according to whatever, this came up in Google, or according to NBC. The Norwegian one uses oil revenue and an investment in stocks, and it has the equivalent of $325,000 per Norwegian. But I think it's not just the largest, like, per capita. I think it's actually the largest, has like $1 trillion or something in it. Anyway, that happened today. You'll recall on Friday, those of you who were with us when Mark Andreessen was here, he talked about what a good idea he thought a sovereign wealth fund would be. It seems like it's a good idea. I just don't know where they're going to get the money. And as I said, I did not understand what's going on.
We can play this. Mark, it's ready. If you want to play it.
All right, let's play Mark Andreessen from last Friday's show talking about sovereign wealth fund.
The companies commercialize in inappropriate ways that technology with primarily private capital. Having said all that, I'd add one more maybe thing that makes it more complex, which is I'm sure you're aware, many other countries outside the U.S. and actually outside of Western Europe now have these so-called sovereign wealth funds, and so they have these large pools of capital. Have the ability to make equity investments, and in some cases, very large-scale equity investments. And those sovereign pools have become very large investors. We have a number of them as investors in our funds. They become major venture capital funders. They become direct investors in a lot of companies, as well as, by the way, they fund everything from they fund huge real estate projects and all kinds of things in their countries. And in those countries, the government actually can be an equity participant in capitalist activity happening in their country. And we just, to your question, we just in the U.S. don't have a tradition of that. We haven't had a mechanism for that. And so hypothetically, you could imagine an American sovereign wealth fund that takes equity stakes, and maybe the kind of thing you're talking about is how that starts, but I don't know if that's what's happening.
Right. So last on the show, I said he was like de Tocqueville. Now he says he's like Nostradamus. Kristen Davidson, Melissa DeRosa, welcome in. What's your connection to the Eagles, Kristen?
Well, I'm from Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is like.
Okay, let's